Tonight we are super lucky to have a friend of mine and colleague from the news world, Kevin FAGAN, to talk to us about his book, The Lost and the Found, following the lives of two chronically homeless people as they descend into horrific despair on the streets of San Francisco and then are rescued when their families find them with the help of Kevin's reporting, resulting in both enormous tragedy and triumph. Kevin, as you probably know, is a longtime veteran reporter at the San Francisco Chronicle, recently retired. And he has focused extensively on the gritty culture of street people. Over 2 decades plus, he produced more than 500 high-impact articles and projects that help drive city and national policy on homelessness, comparing and examining housing and counseling programs in the Bay Area and throughout the nation. From 2016 to 2021, he led the Chronicle's annual sweeping SF Homeless Project, and in 2003, he spent 6 months in San Francisco streets to produce a very influential 5-day Shame of the City series, exploring the then exploding crisis of homelessness and its possible solutions. So we're lucky to hear from him about how this work came to be and some of those experiences. And after his talk, he'll be joined by Nick ROSENLICHT, who has for over 40 years experience in the treatment of psychiatric disorders and recently wrote a book about some of the macro policies that have led to the crisis in mental health and oftentimes the intersection with homelessness. And his book will look to seek answers to how we understand the mental health care crisis and situation and how it fits into larger economic forces. So with that, I would like to welcome Kevin to give us a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kat. Thank you, Mike, my friend and editor at the Chronicle for God knows how long. We both just retired, and I see my demographic is here for the retired crowd. I've been doing, the book came out just a month after I retired, so I've been kind of busy doing that. For 32 years, I was a reporter at the San Francisco Chronicle. I specialized in murder, serial killers, disasters, and homelessness, mostly. All the happy stuff. And I'll tell you, the homelessness reporting was my happy place because all the other stuff is very grim and you don't really learn much from it. Although in disasters you can, point out things that are wrong. But when you report about homelessness, you can actually make a difference. And through the decades, I did. My time as a reporter stretches back to my first homeless story I wrote in 1978. And then I became a daily working reporter in America in 1980. I worked overseas too, but I watched the explosion of homelessness develop throughout the country, really, because I wound up doing stories in all parts of America as a national homeless reporter and then as a local one. And it's a problem that shouldn't exist. I mean, we have 30% poverty in America if you count demographics. And when you have that kind of poverty, you're not going to stuff the toothpaste back in the tube. For every one person who gets housed in San Francisco alone, let alone San Jose and in Oakland, 3 to 4 more people hit the streets. So it's continually shoveling sand into the tide. And like Kat said, in 2003, that's right, I began my most intensive reporting for the Chronicle on homelessness. We had a new editor named Robert Rosenthal, or Rosie as we called him, who came to the paper, was walking around, saw a guy pick a pigeon up and snap its neck and stick it under his coat, presumably to eat later. And he came back to the office and said, we got to do something talking about why there are so many homeless people here. And a bunch of people said, well, we already did a bunch of homeless reporting. I was really glad because I was still doing homeless stories, but the compassion fatigue had set in by then. So he put me and Brant Ward, a photographer, on the streets. He said, take as long as you need. And Brant and I didn't like, we don't like fooling around. We like getting to it. So we said, okay, we'll knock this out pretty quick. It took about 6 months of being in the streets, sleeping outside a lot, getting to know all the quadrants of the city. And at the end, we did a 5-day series. The first day showed the depth and the horror of being chronically homeless, which is when you've been outside for a year or more and you're stuck. And the second day, I believe, was a family living in a van over in the Bayview. Third was me and Brant sleeping in supposedly the most dangerous, worst shelter on the West Coast. It was the biggest one in San Francisco. We didn't find it too bad, but then again, we're kind of hard to displease. And then the fourth was we took a look at what caused homelessness locally and nationally, which I'm sure a lot of you guys know the arc, because it's really not rocket science to see how we came here. And the fifth day was looking at things that worked. And at the end of that 5-day series, it had gotten national attention. President Bush Jr. read it and gave it to his homeless czar and said, here, use this as an ad flyer for supportive housing, which is housing where you bring someone inside and then you surround them with case managers and services that can help them get over whatever put them out on the street to begin with. And a lot of supportive housing got created. A lot of street counseling got created. Initially, Mayor Newsom, at the time, now governor, created an enormous amount of housing through a controversial program called Care Not Cash, which you may remember, but it dropped chronic homelessness by 40%. And then, as happens everywhere that I've seen in the country, mission creep kind of sets in. You have to have a sustained effort to keep homelessness down, to be routing people into services and housing, and then continue that year after year after year. And I did a lot of stuff here in Berkeley. I did a story on People's Park where I broke it into nations once. There was the Hate Man and his bunch. The Hate Man was a pal of mine for many, many years. I wrote his obit. Do you know Hate Man? Yeah, you seem like folks who would know Hate Man. He was a New York Times reporter who came out here, dropped acid, and never left. Which I don't know any other reporters who have done that. He used to get a great laugh out of talking about that with me. And Berkeley has its own. Every city in this Bay Area has its own particular character of homelessness, and the Berkeley bunch is more political, I would say, than even San Francisco, certainly more than San Jose, or Oakland is great. I mean, you can do demographics forever on that. But my book, called The Lost and the Found, is about two people that I got to know over the years and had the privilege of being able to know them deeply. And one of them was a woman named Rita Grant, who I met on a place called Homeless Island. It was a triangle of cement at the corner of Van Ness and Mission, which had rivers of traffic flowing by with stoplights right there. So it was a great panhandling place. About a dozen people gathered there, including Rita Grant and her boyfriend Tommy. And what they do is they take their cardboard signs, go out into the cars when they were stopped, and several of them were missing legs. Most of them were missing teeth. Tommy he was the leader of the bunch, and he was gentle and sweet, actually. They were all addicted to heroin, crack, meth, everything. But when they would present to Panhandle, they were nice. And so it kind of had this reputation of an okay homeless camp. And back then, there weren't tents. Occupy gave us tents in 2011 when suddenly, thousands infused into the streets all over America, and they just never left. This was tarps and shopping carts and cardboard. And as I got to know these folks, Brant and I both got to know these folks, our hearts went out to them and the others that we met all over the city. During the time that we were there, Tommy, Rita's boyfriend, essentially rotted to death, is how the counselors would put it, because he had flesh-eating disease. He had an abscess on his leg, and when we'd wake up in the morning, he'd pick his shoe tongue out of the goo, and it would sound like Velcro ripping up, and it smelled like rotten hamburger. And Brant and I would say, Tommy, you should really get that looked at. And he'd say, it's okay. I get to shoot straight into the veins. And he'd jam his heroin needle right into the goo. It got him. Flesh-eating disease eats you at about 1/4 inch an hour. And one day, people noticed that Tommy hadn't been around much. So Brant and I took it upon ourselves to go find him. Then we found him at the morgue, and he was a mess. And when we went back and told the Islanders, everyone freaked out, and especially Rita, because Rita had been this really promising young woman growing up in New York and Florida. And one of her Achilles' heels was she picked troubled guys to hang with. Her husband, a guy named Doug, who she met in Florida, was a great fisherman, and the two of them lived on boats like Robinson Crusoe alongside an island where you could pick avocados and live off the land and dive for your food. They had 4 kids together. It was all pretty good, but heroin got its grips into them, and then she descended through more heroin, more booze, wound up out here with a scumbag boyfriend who abandoned her as soon as she got here, and then she was on the streets with Tommy. And she'd always had a man in her life. Well, when Tommy died, she was near death herself. She had an abscess like his that was about ready to turn. She had AIDS, full-blown AIDS, hepatitis C. And the thing about her is, I love talking to homeless people in general. They got good jokes. You can be straight, blunt. And I like hearing the stories. With Rita, she presented to me that there was a lot more than usual in her background. And when her story came out with the other Islanders, her sister called me from Florida, where they'd grown up, and said, geez, I didn't know it had gone that bad. We weren't even sure if she was still alive. She actually wrote to me. This is before we actually talked. And said, I'm coming out to get her. Don't call me. Maybe you'll find out later if it worked. So I said, fine. She came out with one of Rita's daughters. They took her back home, and she rehabbed beautifully. She got off drugs. She beat back AIDS. She beat back Hep C. She became a health nutritionist and a licensed massage therapist. And she had her best life. And I flew back a year later to see if this had stuck. I didn't want to go right away because a lot of times these things fail. About half, when you go home, about half people fail out. And she was doing great. So I wrote a story. Then I wrote a story about how she needed teeth, and a couple of dentists jumped in and got her teeth. So Newsom read this and said, well, we should try that with other people. So he started this program called Homeward Bound that has sent about 15,000 people home to date. You have to call home to find out if they want to take you, want to give it a try. You have to talk to the homeless person, see if they want to go, and then you put them together. That's about $250 a person as opposed to $60,000 for a shelter bed, or $40,000 for supportive housing. And about half of those folks stick it out, which I figure is a great success rate in my mind. We became friends, and she's one half of the 2 main people in the book. The other one is a guy named Tyson Filzer, who in 2019, I was doing a story about a proposed shelter along the waterfront. And I come across this guy sitting on a piece of cardboard and have a conversation. Well, what do you think of the shelter idea? Because whenever I wrote about these things, I wanted to get the mayor, the other electeds, the nonprofits, the range of opinions, the residents, and the homeless people, because you want to get the whole panoply. this guy was really thoughtful, named Tyson Filzer. And he was a meth addict and a heroin addict, I could see from his works. And we talked about it. I'm never afraid to say, hey, to call people out on what they're doing. You have to do it sometimes more tactfully than others, but I like having just direct conversations. Homeless people have great bullshit detectors, and I kind of do too. I don't want to mince around too much. You yak them up first, to kind of get a rapport going, and then you have the real conversation. Well, Tyson was great for a real conversation, and wrote this story. Great photographer we have named Jessica Christian shot the photo. By then, Brandt had retired, and it ran in the paper. And his brother calls from Ohio and says, "That's my brother. I haven't seen him in 7 years." Well, I get a lot of calls like that. Help me find him. Where can you connect me with a counselor? And I'm always happy to do that, because I figure doing the job that we do in newspapers, it really is a form of public service. You have to be objective. You have to be assertive. Look for stuff that's broken. Look for stuff that can work. But you're doing a public service. You're informing people. And when people, especially people like this, who call me up and say, "Can you help me find my brother?" What am I going to say? No, I'm too busy. I'm having lunch. No, the guy flies out here, and he hired an interventionist. We walked around all day. I knew where to look, basically. We went to where he was on the cardboard. Of course, he wasn't there because he slept other places and hung out other places. And we found him at night and went back to a hotel to do an intervention. And he took it. He was ready. There's a thing that a lot of counselors call, it's called cooked. You're cooked when you're ready to go. And he was in his 40s. Rita was in her 50s. They both got tired of sleeping face down in the dirt and having to. There's a life cycle you have as a chronically homeless person. You got to find a place to sleep where your teeth won't get kicked in. Got to find your dope or your booze, because most really chronically homeless people are addicted to something. If they weren't when they got to the street, they become addicted later, because it's miserable living outside like that. And then, hang with your friends a little bit, find something to eat, shoot up or smoke up, drink up, go find more dope for a little later, and then find a place to sleep where you won't get your teeth kicked in, sleep, or walk around all night and then sleep sometimes during the day, and then it all starts over again. It is an endlessly depressing life cycle. And I have never met a homeless person who, in their most honest moments at 2 a.m., whenever, will tell you they don't want to be homeless. Everyone wants a roof. Everyone wants a place where you can go and not get messed with, but you get stuck outside. And so Tyson, when the intervention was happening, I long ago decided I am as much a human being as I am a reporter, now a book author. So my message to him was, Tyson, this is your chance. You're going to live or you're going to die. This is something you got to take. Your brother looked for you. I want to write about you. I would like to write a happy story about you getting clean and getting your life back. Help me do that. And didn't take much persuading. I won't tell you how the whole thing ends. It is, as the hype says, tragedy and triumph in the book. And my publisher said, well, don't give away the ending. So, but Tyson, it doesn't go so well for Tyson. It goes great for Rita. And in the course of doing this, Rita and I became great friends over the years. I never thought I was going to write a book about her. I sent her Christmas cards. We talked a lot. My one main message to her, which she agreed with, was never come back to San Francisco. She would always ask, how are the Islanders? Because there was an amazing collection of people there. Little Bit, who was a little person who people would drive up from fancy suburbs like Palo Alto, Atherton, and hire her for sex because they thought she was a kid. They thought they were getting a 12-year-old for $50. And but she was tough, really tough. And there were a lot of funny moments. I couldn't put them all in the book, but they were delightful people to hang out with in their gritty way, which I like. Because one thing they had me do in this book which I originally wasn't going to do, was write a first chapter about myself. Because they said, well, you need to, establish authority, I suppose it was. But a lot of people who cover homelessness, it's nothing they ever really experienced. Well, I grew up poor and I was homeless, briefly, in parts of my life. Got thrown out of the house when I was 16, went and slept in a field, in a garage that I finished out with, furniture built out of scrap wood, figured out how to clean houses, pay the rent, and then go to college, because I figured, well, I'm not going to clean houses and pump gas for the rest of my life. That's a perfectly legitimate job, and it should be a job that you can make a full living at, which has become harder as the decades have gone by. But I wanted to be a journalist from the time I was 14. And so put myself through school, got out, and then became a traveling street singer in Europe, Australia, New Zealand, off and on, which was actually as fun as anything I've ever done. It was a kick in the pants. And you might notice a guitar. My cheap multimedia low wattage technique is I'm going to sing you a song at the end. So, but in the course of all that, I think that prepared me to report on homelessness in a way that I think maybe a lot of folks can't really relate to. Because when you're a writer, people say write what you know. I knew what it was like to be hungry, to not have a place to go home to. And in reporting on homelessness, I got to kind of figure it out. And that's been a really happy thing for me to be able to do, because you get paid for it. I mean, if the rent was paid and I wasn't hungry, I sometimes forgot to pick up my paycheck in my earliest days as a reporter. Then I got married, had a kid, got a house, and then I had to pay attention. So, but I'm going to read you a little bit from this book. Although, I'm going to read you a little bit, then I'm going to show you pictures of Tyson and Rita through the years. There are a few. How many of you actually read this thing? All right. Mike, at the Chronicle, he knew some of these stories to begin with. But it's available everywhere, Amazon, all the bookstores. Let's see. I can read you a passage about Homeless Island. Just like a homeowner, Tommy had picked that corner for location. 4-lane Mission Street and 6-lane South Van Ness Avenue, meeting just a few blocks southwest of City Hall, teeming with traffic, was perfect. A big Honda dealership was on one side of the island, and the sprawling A&M Carpet showroom was on the other side, meaning you had no homeowners to complain. Tourists and workers walked by, drivers stopped at the 4-way traffic lights. They were all rich targets for panhandling. And the traffic island itself, this little triangle of concrete, the island's 2 big leafy trees offered shade from the summer sun and helped fend off the rain, and a tall street lamp gave light. The place was central enough so that pretty much everyone wandering from the crack center of the Tenderloin to the heroin center of the Mission District pulled through with gossip and dope to sell. It was the perfect spot for camping or just hanging out. Tommy had panhandled there before, and a few unhoused people were parking shopping carts there, but when Rita and Tommy started camping there full time, it soon blossomed into a full colony of more than a dozen people parking their carts near the trees in a circle like a Conestoga wagon train. Street cleaners called it Pigeon Island because of the flocks of pigeons that roosted there. But for the people homesteading the concrete, it was always just Homeless Island. And the pigeons were, I used to get pigeon mites from sitting around in the pigeon crap. And then my wife would she'd actually Lysol me when I got home and sometimes burn the clothes. But that never really bothered me that much. I'm going to read you a little bit about how I met Rita. Brant and I were walking around, and he first saw a little bit. He thought she was a kid, like all the Johns did. So he went over, and she said, well, you're all old enough. You're not going to be offended. She had to fuck off. That was her automatic answer to everything until you got to know her. And then she would tell you about her 4 kids, about how she really wanted to be inside, and I watched her turn tricks in the alleys and in the cars, and I mean, that's a hell of a way to live. strongest little thing. Amazing. But very quickly after meeting a little bit, we met Tommy and all the others, and then we got to Rita. Okay. That's when we met Rita Grant. I walked up to her as she sat on the concrete under the trees next to a shopping cart. In her lap was a big cardboard sign with, quote, "Hunger hurts, anything helps," unquote, scrawled on it with a Sharpie. She looked middle-aged and wore a 60s-style beige buckskin fringed jacket and jeans with piping around the pockets. Pretty stylish for a panhandler, I thought. She squinted at me for a long moment. "Got $1?" she asked. "Nah, I'm just here to talk," I said. "I'm a reporter. I'm writing about what life is like out here." Really," Rita said, lips tightening. "Well, it's not good, I'll tell you that." She looked away, and I moved on to another shopping cart. That one would take a little more time to open up, if she would at all, I thought. But something in her manner, her eyes, her moxie, told me it would be worth the effort. And it was, because she was wonderful to talk with. She, what I like about that, even more than, I would rather talk to someone like Rita in the street than your typical elected leader, because they're direct. There's no borders, essentially. I mean, if they don't really want to talk about anything, which is rare, they'll tell you, and they won't mince words, and I appreciate that. But pretty much open books, and I appreciate that a lot. So, when it came to meeting Tyson, it was a hell of a hunt that only lasted one intensive day. And when we finally got a tip for where Tyson was in the Tenderloin, Barron and Vicky, the interventionists he hired, were closer to him than I was. So we all dashed over there, and they got there before me. And Barron, his brother, had a tape recorder in his pocket, which was lucky for me, because then I had a tape recording of about half an hour before the meeting, during the meeting, and then all the intervention afterwards, which he did me a big favor. You're supposed to ask people for permission to record them, but I didn't care. It was great. He gave it to me, and so through that and through talking to Vicky and everyone involved, I reconstructed that exact moment where Tyson and Barron, his brother, who he hadn't seen for 7 years, they finally connected. Time froze just long enough to hear the crunch of discarded needles and glass meth pipes underfoot, long enough to hear the low murmur of a dozen or so homeless people sitting or sprawled on the sidewalk all around them in the darkness, long enough for Barron to focus in on the face of this brother who until this evening he hadn't been sure was still alive. Tyson spoke first, quietly. "Hey, Barron." Relief and sadness swept over Barron, but he knew he had to keep his cool. "Don't mess this up. Keep it simple." "How you doing, man?" Tyson stared, miles of hard times in his face mixed with a note of disbelief. Seconds passed. "Nice to see you," Tyson said, and he stuck out his hand. "Nice to see you. Give me a hug." Barron pulled him close. At Tyson's feet were piles of clothes he had fished out of trash cans all day to sell later on the street. "Want me to watch that stuff for you, Tyson? Take care while you take time with your family?" Seven asked. Seven was another homeless guy who called us and said, "Tyson's here." We'd told him we'd give him $20 if he called. And he didn't really call for the $20, so we gave him $20 anyway. He was a good guy. Tyson nodded. Vicky had parked the car and walked over. She told Seven they brought the $20 they promised him. "Thanks a lot, man," Seven said. "And hey, we're all just glad you guys came." "Awesome," said Vicky. "Thank you," said Barron. "You guys did an amazing job," said Seven. Tyson got ready fast. All he had was a small backpack with a few things in it. "Want to go for a ride?" Barron asked. "Yeah." Tyson got in the car. And then what unfolded was what you'll read in the last 4 chapters of the book. I have a quick slideshow just to put some faces to those 2 names. So Rita, when in high school, her family always called her the homecoming queen. She was actually homecoming queen runner-up, but she might as well have been homecoming queen. She was popular. She was a gymnast who was essentially bound for the Olympics. She was a surfer girl. She was something. That was her in high school. And that was her as a young mother, as she met Diver Doug, this guy who lived the Robinson Crusoe life with her. It sounded idyllic. The kids told me, dinner time had come, and Doug would say, "Okay, I'll go get dinner," and he'd dive over the side of the boat and come up with crab and lobster. Literally every day. They lived on Key West, and the Keys were just stuffed with this kind of food. And that's what she looked like when I met her on Homeless Island. That's with a woman named Susan, who was one of the islanders, who I believe is, just about all of them are dead now. It's been 22 years. You don't last long. A lot of them were in their 30s, 40s, 50s. Some of them got inside, but even then they didn't last long after that. And that's her with Tommy, the guy who the flesh-eating disease killed. That's what she looked like when she'd panhandle. She's kind of stylish. Even when she was at her most down and out, she managed to scavenge clothes that had a little bit of class. Now here's Tyson. Tyson grew up in Danville with parents who made a good living. Dad was an accountant. Mom was a realtor. They lived in one of the highest income counties of, actually the country, and went to a great school. He was popular. He played football. He was the class clown. What we learned later was he also had a bipolar condition. And he was, as he got older and aged out of high school, he started self-medicating with cocaine. Cocaine led to booze, led to meth, led to heroin, because you want the heroin to bring you down, the coke to jack you up, and that tumbled him all the way to the streets. But that was him as a promising young man. He was a good kid. And Barron, they were both athletes, good students, smart. He was also in the Pan Theater in Oakland. He was a good actor. There's even a clip of him on a TV show where he had a walk-on. But shortly after this, he started doing what I call a ladder roll for homeless folks, rattling down every ladder you had. First, you use up your family. Then you use up your friends. Can't couch surf anymore. You go to government programs. Finally, you wind up on that piece of cardboard. That's where I talked with him that first time. And he never looked that bedraggled, but he was chronic. He was out in the street hardcore for more than 7 years. And this is Barron, his brother, flew out from Ohio, and he made a poster out of that picture that Jessica shot of Tyson sitting on the piece of cardboard, and we'd show it to homeless people. And Barron was so sweet. Barron he'd kept track of his brother through jail records and occasionally called the police or shelters, but even that dried up over the years. So he really hadn't spent much time with homeless people, but he's got a big heart, and he was so sincere, and it really touched us, because the homeless folks that we'd ask would say, yeah, you gotta, I think I saw him over there, a couple blocks away. No, he's over there. If you find him, you gotta help him. He's been saying that he would like his family to come find him, and then we did. That's the moment that I just read to you, where they met. And you can see the 1,000-yard stare on Tyson. And Barron is just, good God, he did a GoFundMe before he came out here for $40,000, because that's what it takes to do residential rehab for 90 days. And there's Rita after her sister Pam. That's the Beatles song, isn't it? Her sister Pam. So she took Rita back, and when Rita got teeth, Rita got straight, that's one of the first photos they sent to me after I came back from Florida and wrote those first stories about them. I just love that shot. That's what she looked like about a year after that. She embraced stability, which is hard. It's really hard to not backslide. And then Brant and I, when I was finishing up the book, we went back in 2022 and spent quite a bit of time with Rita and her family in Florida, and that's what she looked like then. I'll go ahead and tell you that I wrote her obit. You can find it online. She died of cancer in 2023. Yeah. And when Tyson got off the street, his brother first sent him to a detoxification center in the Sierras, where you come down off the dope and you kind of get straight. Then sent him to this rehab center in Mississippi, where they have horses. And I got to admit, when he told me he was doing that, I thought, really, horses? Is it, really? But turns out it's a pretty cool technique. I mean, they're these giant pet-like critters that teach you interaction and patience. It worked. It worked for him really well. And then Barron came and got him, and that's the two of them flying back to Ohio. 1999. I think that's kind of wrong. I'll have to fix that date. And that's when he was fully stabilized back in Ohio in a sober house. And that's the end of that. I just thought you might like to see what these folks look like, the ones who I just told you about. Now, how are we doing on time, Kat? Okay, I'll just read you a little bit about myself. About why I do this, which I think I tried to explain, but I put it down. It's on the first page of this book. It's called This Is Personal. It said, I started covering street life as a cub reporter in the 1980s when the Reagan era's furious attack on federal support for poor people finally detonated the growing problem that began with the dismantling of mental institutions in the 1970s and crescendoed into what we now call homelessness. I've covered plenty of other topics since then, from mass shootings, executions, and serial killers to drought disasters in the American West. I am a dyed-in-the-wool journalist, which I believe means that you try to become accomplished at most things in the newsroom as a reporter and editor, then specialize in something, or in my case, a few somethings, most of them grim. But I got into journalism for a few core reasons, and taken together, they are not grim. First, I love writing. Second, I love studying people, drilling down on things other people can't or don't want to see, what I like to call shoving my face headfirst into life, up close. And third, I want to help to make the world around me a better place, which has always inevitably led me back to writing about poverty and homelessness. Beyond my repertorial impulses, there is also this. As the saying goes, write what you know. I know what it's like to be poor and to not have a home. And now I hope you go buy the book and read the rest. Now I have a song for you. I learned it in New Zealand when I was traveling streets. I hitchhiked from town to town, sleep in doorways, or in alongside of the road. It didn't matter to me. If it rained, I put a tarp over. It was a good way to learn how to get things. And when you pulled out your case, and people looked at you like you were pulling down your pants, you got to earn the crowd. And in the course of all that, I learned this song was written by John McClane, who wrote American Pie and other great songs. I was walking by the graveyard late last Friday night. I heard somebody yelling, it sounded like a fight. It was just a drunken hobo dancing in circles in the night, pouring whiskey on the headstones in the moonlight.
fortunate to be able to zoom in on some characters and some individual compelling stories, and it begs the question I think many of us have when we need to zoom out and figure out, why does this happen? What are the failures in our community and our society to understand the underlying problems, and also the lack of resources to make a change significantly? So Nick, if you would like to come up and just talk a little bit about your book and some of the things that you found, that might provide a little bit of context for the stories we just heard. And then there will be an opportunity for people to ask questions of both authors. So please.
Well, thanks so much, Kevin. I'm not sure, tough act to follow, but actually there are some parallels. I probably should mention that your experience with homelessness, as I was just going off for college, my family took in a street. As I was taking off, I was talking about parallels with Kevin's experience, that just as I was leaving home for college, my family took in a 16-year-old off the streets, living on Telegraph Avenue, was there after her parents had drunk themselves to death, she and her brother, and we adopted her. She's done well. It was tough for a while. I just talked to her yesterday. She's been married for 40 years, doing well, working as a horse trainer. Her brother was a little older. He didn't come live with us. He died a few years later on the streets of heroin, but it's a really tough street. But I think what Kevin, you're pointing out is these are real people. I think, some of the books on mental illness, like Unquiet Mind or The Best Mind or The Center Will Not Hold, these are amazing people, but these are not what most homeless people or mentally are. These are regular human beings who have an illness. And our society and we and our feelings very successfully other them. So we sort of absolve ourselves of responsibility and keep them out of our community, which is really what works best for treating them. Not everyone on the streets, I think you could say, starts out with mental illness, but try living on the streets for a bit, where if you go to sleep, you have a very good chance of getting your face kicked in and everything you own stolen. Try doing that for a while. The California Homelessness Project last year, in interviewing people who are regularly using drugs on the street, 64% of them started on the streets, the regular use, because you need to be vigilant all night or you'll be beaten and things will be stolen for you, and you need something to quell the pain during the day. It's not easy living on the streets. It's really survival. Backing up a little, I'm going to talk a little about our healthcare system that I think is causing this. I was motivated to write this book because I entered psychiatry and addiction medicine that I do 40 years ago, and I think we're doing a worse job of treating people than we did 40 years ago. We've had no major great breakthroughs in treatment, and we can't even implement the treatments we have and ones we know work the way we used to. Children today, the first generation, have a shorter life expectancy than their parents. Most of this is due to addiction medicine, substance misuse, and mental illness. More people died of suicide, overdose, and alcohol in the 2020 to 23 period during the pandemic than died of COVID. Turned our world upside down in managing COVID. We ignore substance abuse and mental illness. It's estimated that about a little over 4% of healthcare dollars, insurance dollars, is spent on mental illness and addiction. 4.4%. 1.3% of philanthropic giving is given to mental illness and substance use. We all act like this won't affect us, but I know the streets here are pretty ugly, and I won't ask for hands, but who here doesn't personally know someone who doesn't know somebody, or have a family member, a kid, an uncle, or somebody who has really suffered or died from mental illness or substance abuse? It affects all of us. When I go to a party, people sort of laugh, oh, you're a psychiatrist and whatever, and make some joke, but they are calling me the next day, or they catch me by the coat rack as I'm leaving and ask for help. People just don't want to admit that it's touching them. We've othered mental illness throughout history. It just makes us uncomfortable as Michel Foucault called, those who cannot get a grip on their inner mind. It basically threatens our sense of self, and it really bothers us. The asylums were set up in the mid-1800s as a remedy for the situation we have now, so that these poor, burdened families or people on the streets could have a place to go. It was grounded on the integration of medical care and what was called moral therapy, which followed the principles of kindness, mildness, reason, and humanity. And they actually worked for a while. Of course, by the middle of last century, they were hellholes. 1 out of 2 hospital beds in this country were for the mentally ill, 50%, and they were horribly overcrowded. And yes, they were hellholes, but there's an interesting book written called The Shame of the States by Albert Deutsch in 1948, which is around the time when people were recognizing how awful these places were, and there were a lot of exposés. We spent $1.25 per day on the care of the mentally ill. That works out to $16 in today's money. We currently spend 10 times that on incarcerating the mentally ill in prisons. Currently, our 3 biggest mental health inpatient facilities are Rikers Island Jail in New York, Cook County Jail, and LA County Jail. These are our 3 biggest facilities. If you have serious mental illness, you are 10 times more likely to be incarcerated in a jail or prison than be in a hospital. We blamed institutionalization on the development of these medications, which did help, but it was more than that. It was this anti-psychiatry movement. It was it was sort of an interesting right wing and left wing, the ACLU on the left, the John Birch Society on the right, trying to keep the government out of people's lives. But, if they were actually welcomed into society, I don't think we would need to look at it that way. It mainly was a cost-cutting measure. The government got out of the business of treating the mentally ill and turned it over to the insurance companies, who now systematically avoid paying for mental health care. As I mentioned, maybe 4%. There was hope in 1963. The last law that President John Kennedy signed before his assassination was the Community Mental Health Center Act, which was to set up a system of mental health centers throughout the country. Interestingly, Italy, a guy named Basaglia, a psychiatrist, took this model to Italy, and in Trieste, it's the WHO model for psychiatric care. Almost no hospitalizations needed community care, peer support, crisis management, and keeping people in the community housed with a role in the community. They are part of the community. They have a role. They're not cast off in distant asylums or into homeless shelters or homeless encampments. We had 500,000 people in the asylums in 1960. We now have about 400,000 in jails and prisons, and about probably close to 500,000 homeless. We've just moved them out of what should have been a safe place into prisons and homeless centers. A lot of this has to do with, I think, our business of medicine. The insurers were not really eager to take this on because it's costly, and it was very easy to turn people into clients, something you could make money on. And it served us to kind of look at the mentally ill as psychiatric patient, but we wouldn't be that, or none of our people we know. These are clients. They just need a little tune-up and can see somebody, a master's level therapist. They don't really need a psychiatrist or somebody seriously ill, serious illness. But this is like we would have one clinic for people with pneumonia and another clinic for people with bronchitis. Trying to discriminate who's seriously ill and not really doesn't work, and trying to separate the mentally ill who are treated separately in different places than the physically ill is complete nonsense. There's a study at Kaiser that showed 60 to 90% of primary care visits were precipitated by psychosocial factors, not medical. They had illnesses, but what brought them in was stress and psychological things. But they couldn't get care in that realm, so they came to their primary care docs. So, and And there are other countries that do much better than us. Even like in rural India, where they don't even use much medication. These people are kept in the community, they are given jobs, they are given purpose, and they're treated like human beings. And I think we could do a whole lot better. I'm not sure what else, and I could pepper you with statistics, but maybe I'll just read the first paragraph or two of my book, which does cover some of this stuff, and hopefully that'll give you an idea of this, and I hope understand where I'm coming from. In the fall of 2021, I was returning from the airport on BART, San Francisco Bay Area's rail transit system. It was near midnight, and half of my co-passengers seemed to be homeless and using the system for shelter. I'm sure you people can relate to this. I missed the connection in the East Bay, and with a handful of others, had a half-hour wait at a dark underground station. Joining us was a visibly deranged man, screaming obscenities and threats at an unseen person. As a diminutive and very frightened woman sidled up to me, the man circled us, ranting, wildly gesticulating and attacking a bench, a sign, an intercom phone. Fortunately, not us. Appallingly, this is not an uncommon occurrence. Growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area in the 1960s and 70s, I learned to question established institutions and authority. High school classes were interrupted when tear gas from nearby anti-war protests wafted our way. A commonly seen bumper sticker exhorted us to question authority, and we were told to let your freak flag fly. Foremost among the institutions to be questioned was the mental health system, especially the reviled and rapidly imploding state mental institutions. We cheered at the protagonist McMurphy's exploits in Ken Kesey's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, a devastatingly critical look and later movie about a psychiatric hospital, and King of Hearts, a 1966 film depicting an insane asylum's endearingly lovable inmates who appear more sane than those waging war in the outside world. Just how much these films resonated with Americans' feelings about mental health care and the asylums is indicated by the praise heaped upon Cuckoo's Nest. It swept the Academy Awards, winning Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Actress, and Best Adapted Screenplay. Even Kesey's odd disclaimer about the story, "It's the truth, even if it didn't happen," gave a window into the public's view on mental illness and its treatment. Those idealistic ideas about mental illness and its treatment have imploded. As I negotiate bodies and human feces on our downtown sidewalks, endure petty crime, and see people who cycle in and out of jail, I can only shake my head in disgust at our failed mental health system. Once the envy of the world, our healthcare system is consistently rated dead last among developed nations in measures of quality, outcomes, and accessibility. In terms of cost, it's in a league of its own, double that of any developed countries. The shameful aspect of our last-place healthcare system, the most shameful, is the treatment of mental illness. As I mentioned, we've lost more people in the pandemic to suicide, overdose, and alcohol than we did to COVID. Suicide is now the second most common cause of death in 10 to 24-year-olds in this country, behind only accidents. During the pandemic, suicides in the elderly rose to a level not seen since the Great Depression, probably fueled by a great sense of isolation. For all our worry about violent crime, we are more than twice as likely to die at our own hands as at the hands of another, and 5 times more likely to die by overdose. But as I mentioned, insurers spend a little more than 4% of their dollars on mental health and addiction treatment. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that good context and kind of appalling statistics, but it helps explain some of why we are where we are. Kevin and Nick, if you are available to answer a few questions and talk with each other a little bit about your experiences, I think that would be great. Please.
You know, the whole pull down, the right wing, the pull down of the mental institutions, the right wingers liked it because you could save money on not doing things for crazy people, and the left wingers liked it because you would be compassionate. integrating them back into the community in board and care homes. And when I went to San Jose State, it was during the time when frats were out of favor, and so a bunch of frat houses got sold. The place was ringed by, good God, it felt like 24 board and care homes. And I used to play Christmas concerts in the mental homes, where I kept that up over the years. Played at Napa State Hospital, the prison for the criminally insane in New Zealand, and the audiences are incredible audiences. They are talking to the wall, scratching themselves, sometimes shaving. I found that what they most wanted to listen to was "You Are My Sunshine." None of those thoughtfully written stories that we came up with. But it's a tragedy when you see people screaming at telephone poles. Is that compassionate? No. We do a terrible job. If you measure a society by how it treats its most needy, and we fail in America. We just fail. I've lived overseas and seen it firsthand that it was better. It's a tragedy.
No, I agree. I'm mentally ill, flying in the face of the rugged individual American ideal. But we grow by helping others. We actually feel better ourselves when we're working to help others more than ourselves, and we've somehow forgotten that.
Yeah, and we actually prosper. We save money if we do the right thing. I like what you said about chronically homeless people. If you weren't mentally traumatized before you hit the streets, you are by the time you've been on it. And typically, chronically homeless person will cost about $85,000, $90,000 a year in police calls, emergency, jail, all that, as opposed to what we would spend if we actually treated people decently.
Yeah, my daughter actually works for emergency service in Berkeley. In major cities, 20% of police time is spent on basically shuttling around people with mental illness, not people committing crimes. There was a huge study in New Zealand finding that, you save money by treating the mental illness. And just in this country, there was a study finding that for every $100 you spent in mental illness treatment, you save $190 in overall health costs. It would save us money. But our system is too busy shuttling off, who's going to pay, who's going to pay, who's going to pay. So, and the mentally ill and their family, who are stigmatized and embarrassed and overwhelmed, are really bad at trying to negotiate our very, very difficult system. There's one statistic that Americans spent over 500 million hours a year on the phone with their insurers. People with serious mental illness don't even have a phone. How are they going to access an insurer,
Yeah, let alone homeless people.
Yeah.
You can get phones as homeless people, but usually they get stolen or
Yeah.
broken or lost, that kind of thing. Do you guys, questions? You decided to ride the rails with the hobos. Was there a difference in that experience of meeting those people and the homeless? Oh yeah, that was the homeless world has demographics just as our house world does. And hobos are a kick in the pants. This is in the early 90s. I hopped freights and went up to Oregon. And I rode with a hobo and slept in the graveyard in Dunsmuir with the king of the hobos. There's a whole world there that's geared towards purposely going from place to place and trying to find work. And that's dated back to, the early 1900s. Jack London wrote this great book called On the Road, which reflects a lot of hobos today. That song I sang was written about hobos, but about homeless folks in general. It was fun. You don't see America like you do from a flat car where the boxcar doors open. They call it America's backyard. It's wonderful. You're breaking the law, so you have to avoid the guards. But the idea is you don't do harm. Most hobos are not bad people. They're not messing anything up. They're just catching a free ride on an empty. They call them empties, on an empty. So I figure it doesn't hurt anyone, and it's fun. It was a more capable homeless population. than than certainly the chronics.
There's also a community around that.
I'm gonna help you. There you go. You want that thing right up there.
Okay. There's more of a community there too, where there's shared information and lifestyle, and you have a sense of belonging in the hobo community more. Yeah. And it's sort of it's a follow through of what happened in the Depression when so many people were forced into that lifestyle.
Yeah, in fact, there was a place called Pipe City here, in Oakland. You heard about that one? Yeah, wonderful. There was a company that made cement pipes. Well, hobos, Oakland has always been a wonderful hobo stop. Jack London used it famously in his book. And there were hundreds of these cement pipes. Hobos poured in during the Depression and started sleeping in the pipes. And they called it Pipe City. The city tolerated it. And until finally, business types and people, till they didn't. But when the mayor issued an order to empty out the pipes, he had a big party for Pipe City, and fed all the hobos, gave them gifts, sent them on their way. It was a really different attitude toward, and that was in the Depression, really different attitude toward poverty than we have today. The scanner. Yeah, late 70s and 80s, that whole Mitch Snyder kind of moment.
Right. That was actually a fact that wasn't publicized much. In World War II, actually, more than half of the emergency medical evacuations were for psychiatric reasons. And a big burgeoning of the asylums was guys from World War II with PTSD. What happened, which the double whammy post-Vietnam, is they came back to all these places being shuttered, so they had no place to go. And until, many years later, the government wasn't going to help them. Matter of fact, the diagnosis of PTSD was really instigated and instituted by, his name, was it Lifkin? Anyway, to help reimburse and recompensate these guys who had such an awful time in Vietnam, and then the hands are washed of them. Excuse me.
Yeah, vets were actually one of the few success stories in homeless treatment is on homeless vets. Over the last 10 years, the number of homeless veterans has been cut in half.
Yeah.
By, and Nick, I think you know about this, the intensive effort by the VA, HUD, the federal agencies that had more capabilities to treat veteran homeless people than non-veteran homeless people.
Yeah, it's going away now. I worked in a homeless veterans center for about 8 years, but that's now unfortunately really disappearing. But there was an effort put behind that, and it did really work.
Yeah, and that's why it's really extra tragic to see those services being decimated again, as in many years ago. It'll be really interesting to see where this goes. There has to be a. What do you see ahead, Nick?
I'm really worried. I mean, RFK's uncle was the one who instituted these community mental health centers because his sister Rosemary had been institutionalized and lobotomized, and he wanted something better. I don't know if RFK can get back to his roots. Ted Kennedy was a big proponent of single-payer health care to get treatment for everyone, which I think is what's going to have to happen if we're going to get mental health treatment in it too. So I don't know. It's not looking good right now. They're just decimating the VA, and I'm sure the rest is going to follow. So I'm really, really worried. Maybe things have to get worse before they get better.
There's always a better way. There really is. The conversation in the 80s was well, let's give people a shelter cot and a sandwich, and then they'll pull themselves up.
Right.
And then as advocates began to get more of a voice, it was we're all one paycheck away from homelessness. Well, we're not all one paycheck away from homelessness. We're one giant ladder of rungs to rattle down before you become homeless. If you're hanging on by your fingernails in poverty with complicating factors, that ladder's shorter, but domestic violence, mental illness, a disability, you lose your job, you were just barely scraping by, which most people in America don't have more than $400 in the bank. That wouldn't take that much to fall down, but it's a longer process than just, you're homeless the next day. That's my spiel.
Yeah, no, I think so. There's lip service, we're just one paycheck away. I think most people feel like that would never happen to me. And that's the way we behave. That could never happen to me or someone I know, except stop and wait. Do you know somebody? And we do. Yeah. But we just don't acknowledge it. We just don't acknowledge it.
I got some ideas. You want to
Go ahead.
Oh. Well, you can buy as little as $20 a day if you're what they call chipping, taking little bits of the dope. They're different prices. Fentanyl's generally about $5 a hit, and you'd have to take about 4, maybe 5 smokes a day to keep from getting what they call dope sick. Heroin, a couple times a day. You can get enough shots of heroin to maintain that for $15. Depends on where you're buying your dope, what alley, what plaza, but that's generally about what it is. Methamphetamines, it's all about the same price, and you can go up from there. Some people can, I've known addicts who spend $100 a day, and if you're homeless in the street, sleeping in a tent, you're not, some people do work, but a lot of times you got to steal stuff, you got to scrounge out of dumpsters, sell things on the sidewalk, trade sex for it. There's a lot of that. It's a rough way to go, and the money is not coming in some happy little paycheck somewhere. It's an underground economy that's really tough, and there are drug dealers that are so happy to feed it.
Yeah, I agree. It's not easy, and it's mean what a lot of things people have to do to get their drugs. They're not mean people, but good people do really bad things when they're jonesing. But that's why your bicycle's going missing. That's why your radio gets stolen, your car window. It's just like, I got to get something by the end of the day because I'm jonesing really bad. It's just, it's ugly, and this is our world.
Yeah, and if you see someone who's dope sick, it's terrible. Yeah. You get the shakes. You're sweating. Head feels like it's going to explode. It's an awful thing.
Well, it's probably not one illness, and it probably has a lot of causes and what we call schizophrenia. I'm hoping we're going to, and it's, I think, a developmentally developed illness, and we will probably be able to prevent it in a lot of cases, is my guess. But we're a long ways away from it,
That's terrible. Why is it we can never get, because in the 70s, people thought, these great in the 70s, people thought these great drugs were out on the market now. It was going to fix it all.
Well, go through this in my book. Our best drugs for psychiatric disorders are all over 50 years old. Best drug far and away for bipolar disorder is lithium. For schizophrenia, it's clozapine, which has been around since, I think, 1963. The best drugs, and they're controversial because of dependency for anxiety and panic, are the benzodiazepines. They're just badly used because they need to be monitored very carefully. We now have these new drugs that look so good, like MDMA, which was synthesized in 1912. Ketamine, which has been around since the 60s. But since these things were around for other purposes, they weren't easily patentable. And what gets drugs out there is their profit, not that they're help. And matter of fact, I think it was like, I think Goldman Sachs put out a bulletin to warning drug companies, like, you don't want to produce a drug like for hepatitis C, which cures it now, because then you don't have any patients, and then you don't have sustainability. You don't want to produce drugs that cure. So we have these rafts in psychiatry, these Me Too drugs, 8, 10 SSRIs, these atypical antipsychotics, which are just Me Too drugs, because they're cheaper to bring to market. They'll work a little, no better than the old ones, but you can make some money. This Cobenfy just came out for schizophrenia based on a theory that we know doesn't work from the 60s, but it does lower side effects so people feel a little better, and they're charging $37 a pill for it. It's just, these drugs are put out because they make money, not because they make people better.
And other countries do this so much better than we do. One of the statistics I have in my book is I worked in England for a while, and early on in my career, Britain has a population of almost 60 million people. Their rough sleepers, or the chronically homeless population, is about the same as San Francisco's, with 800,000 people. Because they have living wage, national health, council housing, and a society that treats this as rights rather than privileges for those who can afford them.
They're so much better. Although you're hearing about bad things in England, the Tories have been doing their best to kill, universal health. But they're still spending less than half of what we do for so much better care.
Yeah. This lady in the front, you had a question.
No, you're talking about somebody with mental illness or addiction. You can't just give them a house. You can't treat them without housing, but you can't just, these people are disorganized, they're addicted, they're confused. They need support, they may need medication, they need the sense of community. I talk about in my book, I had a group for a while that was for medications, but we fed people. We had juice and cookies, and people showed up, not only when they needed medication, they showed up every week, and they left and came together. If there's a sense of belonging and support and help, but without that, you can't just hand people pills. You can't just hand them an apartment. You can't just hand them this. They do need to climb the ladder again to get back up there.
Yeah, and supportive housing is it's a wonderful thing when it's done right, and there are wonderful examples all through the Bay Area of newly built buildings with adequate staffing of 15 to 20 residents per case manager and surrounded. When it's done right, it's beautiful. When a lot of the housing in San Francisco and a lot in San Jose is in century-old buildings that fall apart. And oh hell, I and my colleagues at the Chronicle wrote several packages over the years about how this wasn't working, it wasn't staffed well enough, not enough money to upgrade them. But when you do it right, it's wonderful. And if you build affordable housing that's not ramshackle, which is the hope now is building affordable housing. You don't need case managers there. These are just poor people who need a place to live. That's fine. It's the supportive housing for the folks that Nick and I are talking about. That's where you need the services.
I think we have time for one last question.
I say that's generally crap, because 70% of the people in San Francisco who are homeless were housed in San Francisco before they became homeless. Usually that number is 80% in most communities. And sure, you got some people who came out here, they lived for a little bit, it didn't work out, and then they crashed down. But homeless people like to be where their friends, where their community
people
is.
are.
Yes, they're people.
Yeah, and so if they, like your guy, but both your people, they ended up going back to their families. I mean, families usually want people back once they've been treated and can be managed. You want to be around your family and friends, and or wherever the community is. And I think the community will also feel better about it if it's not some ramshackle, poorly supervised, people ranting kind of household, but these are actually people who want to be part of helping the community. you know, they want to belong. They do. They're just scared and confused.
Yeah, and doing good programs doesn't, it draws some people, sure, but not the bulk. You don't get overrun by outsiders.
Thank you so much for attending, and Kevin and Nick, can we have a round of applause? Tell us again the name of your book and where we can find them.
Oh, mine is called The Lost and the Found, and you can find it at every bookstore, on Amazon, anywhere you buy books. So, and if you come to one of my readings, if you go to kevinfaganwriter.com, I put my readings and my events, my public events, on the events tab, and I'll sign the book for you if you show up.
My Brother's Keeper, and it's available in most bookstores, Amazon, all these places. And that's sort of a reference because I had learned and people use I'm not my brother's keeper because, hey, I'm not responsible. But the biblical reference really was when Cain was lying to the Lord about what he'd murdered his brother. And we mistakenly think that means we aren't responsible for each other, but we are. So, and actually, well, I'm giving an Aldi course Friday at 11:30, I think for free if people want, and I'll be on Commonwealth on May 1st. You can hear more then.
Thank you, and Kevin, if you would oblige and play us out with another.
You want one more song?
Oh, wow.
And there's cheese and crackers, cookies, and wine for everybody who wants something before we. So thank you so much again.
Well, since all my stories are so happy, this is about one of the islanders, homeless islanders, was a woman named Jill, who was sleeping on the street with her boyfriend named Ricky. And Ricky stiffed a crack dealer on $150 worth of crack. So the dealer came back and doused Jill in gas and lit her up and burned her to death. So I knew Jill really well. I slept on the sidewalk alongside her and Ricky. And I covered the trial for the killer. And once the verdict got read, the homicide cop, Jill's family, Ricky and I went out to the spot near Candlestick Park where Jill had died, and parts of her were still fried into the cement. And we had a little ceremony there. And I sang this song, which I'd written years before, and it fit because Jill was just the sweetest little thing, addicted to everything, and another street sex worker. But it just broke my heart when she died. So.